Hi, I hope you are well. This podcast is a place for people to share personal and professional perspectives, talk openly, and ask questions. From serious to silly to sublime, it's all about communication and connection. Always coming from a place of kindness and curiosity, we talk about shared humanity, discuss ideas, and highlight people creating a better world. We've got to keep learning, keep growing, keep being. I'm Melissa Beek, and this is Beek on Being. Today's episode is Beek on Being and Trauma. Life is challenging, from relationships to work to world events. We may use coping mechanisms that don't really help us to live our best lives. Whether you experience a traumatic event or push it off as just something that happened, if you don't address it, that experience can diminish the quality of your life and relationships and affect your ability to cope. Licensed clinical psychologists Dr. Andrea Loeb and Dr. Summer Sullivan, practice owners of South Miami Psychology Group, are here to discuss it all. So welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. Will you introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about you?
Sure.
Okay.
I am Dr. Andrea Loeb. I am the proud co-owner of South Miami Psychology Group with Summer.
Yay.
We've been in practice over 16 years, but we've been together longer than that, running our business, which we'll talk about a little later. I grew up in Miami. I went to Nova Southeastern University for grad school. I have a PsyD, which is a doctor of psychology, for those of you who don't know. And I split my time professionally with a couple things, mainly running South Miami Psychology Group, which we're super proud of. I'm also on the board of Christie House, which is a children's advocacy center for, used to be just sexual abuse, but now it's all child trauma.
Okay.
And I started the therapy program there in 1999.
Amazing.
And now I'm on the board, so I make more like programmatic decisions. But it's been a really amazing experience. And then I'm also adjunct faculty at Nova Southeastern University, where I help train trauma psychologists in doing trauma therapy with children and adolescents, which is really more of a passion project because there are not a lot of people who like to work in the area specifically of child trauma, but even more kind of fine-tuned of child sexual abuse.
Yeah.
A lot of people like to stay away from that.
Sure.
And so it's incredible to be able to do that. But the
Wow.
work in general, no matter which, area I'm working in, is such a special profession. And it's an honor to sit across from people, usually in their moments that are their most vulnerable and talking about their hardest things, and to be able to sit with them. So
Wow.
thanks for having me.
Amazing. I'm so happy you're here.
Yes.
I don't know when you sleep with all of that, but okay.
Not sure either.
And I'm her better half. I'm just kidding.
I love that.
My name is Dr. Summer Sullivan. I am also a Miami native, which I think is something important to mention because I'm very proud of that. I received a master's in marriage and family therapy and then my doctorate in counseling psychology from the University of Miami. So go Canes. I have always been passionate, I would say, about psychology. I knew from when I was a freshman in high school, which I feel really fortunate to say that I knew what I wanted from day one. But it really came from feeling like a lost teenager, like a ball of emotions, and wanting to really understand, why do I feel so emotional all the time? Now I understand I was a highly sensitive child and I just felt emotions really deeply and there was nothing necessarily wrong with me.
Yeah.
But I started to dive in and started reading books on psychology in high school. And I just fell in love and I knew this is exactly what I wanted to do.
You found your passion.
When I went to college, I studied psychology, got an undergraduate degree in psychology, and then came right back to University of Miami to do my graduate studies. Fortunately, when I was looking for my postdoc, which is the training that you do once you graduate from the doctoral program, I found a placement in a residential treatment facility for foster children that had been experiencing sexual abuse and trafficking. And it was not something that I had ever known that I was going to go into. It just happened to be like, that's where I got my placement. And I fell in love with that work.
Wow.
And then I wanted to do more of it. So someone fortunately introduced me to Andrea and called Andrea, one of the psychologists that I knew, and asked Andrea, hey, are you interested in taking on a postdoc? And she's like, okay, never thought about it,
Right.
but
I wasn't sure.
that sounds fun.
Yep.
And it was a perfect placement for me because I was already really falling in love with trauma and
Right.
helping support teens with sexual assault. And Andrea was already an expert in that area. So it was a perfect match from
Yeah.
the beginning.
It was.
And then I'm going to throw it back to her so
Okay.
she can tell the rest of our origin story, like
I
we
love
like
it.
to call it.
I love it.
But
Yes. Yes. So this colleague of ours, our mutual colleague, just kind of put us together. And I was like, I don't even know what that would entail, but I'll try it. We started working together. Summer got her license and we looked at each other and we were like, wait a second, like it can't end here. We really love working together. And so we kind of say, and that's where we fell in love.
I love it.
And that's the funny part of the story. But it turned into, so it was just the two of us for a
Right.
while. And started off as, I was her supervisor, she was my postdoc, and then we were colleagues. And it's really grown into us being best friends.
I love that.
And so we got something out of it that neither of us ever had any idea. Summer was kind of checking a box, and it's been beautiful.
It's amazing. Does the person who introduced you know what they started?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
And we still talk to her, and she's a fellow practice owner
Oh,
too.
good.
So, and it's just been amazing. And so it started off just the two of us.
Right.
And then gradually, because we both grew up here, people who maybe became psychologists or mental health counselors or clinical social workers who maybe took some time off to raise children
Right.
were like, oh, would you guys consider taking me on part-time or me on full-time? It was never our intention to have this big of a practice, and it just kind of grew, and we started to fine-tune what we were looking for
Right.
for South Miami Psychology
Right.
Group, and
Right.
kind of what was going to make it a big, thriving practice.
Right.
And so, like we said, it started off just the two of us. We were Andrea Loeb, PsyD, PA, and associates, basically. And then we were like, wait, we need a different name.
We need a heading.
We need a heading. So in 2010, we became South Miami Psychology Group, and 17 clinicians later,
Amazing.
here we
that
are.
many. That's so fabulous.
Yeah.
You should be so proud. That's so
we are.
incredible.
We
Yeah.
are.
And even though 17 sounds like a lot, it really is a family. It feels
Yeah.
really intimate. When I
Yeah.
hear that number, I'm like, wow, that sounds like so many. But we really have an intimate boutique feel to our practice.
Oh, I love that.
And we know all of our clinicians very intimately. We consult with them all the time, collaborate on cases. So
That's so cool.
It's
And
been
that
amazing.
you have each other. I can't, it's spectacular. So tell me a little bit about like what population that you all see in the practice and what modalities you use.
Yes. So what's really cool about our practice is our vision about the practice was that right now people, especially because of the internet and
Yeah.
AI, people are really knowledgeable about what they need. And so people actually call asking for specialists in specific areas,
Okay.
specialists in certain modalities. So we call the practice SMPG for short. At SMPG, we really Summer and I make a concerted effort to make sure we have specialists in most areas, because we
Okay.
would never want someone to finally get the courage to call
Yeah.
and then for
Not
us
have
to
someone who
say,
can help them.
sorry, we have someone who can kind of do that. So we've assembled
Yeah.
purposefully
Yeah.
people. So you heard that both of us have passion with trauma,
Right.
child sexual abuse, things like that. I also about 5 to 10 years ago started becoming really interested in OCD. And actually those two things, trauma and OCD, tend to co-occur. So
Oh,
they're
interesting.
my ideal people that I tend to see are people who have both
Got it.
across the lifespan.
I didn't know there was a connection with that.
There is.
That's cool.
There is oftentimes. And it's neat because sometimes if you just treat one of them, the other one will remit.
Sure.
Or you can treat both of them alongside each
Right.
other. So it's really
That's fabulous.
interesting. So those are my two kind of passions.
Uh-huh.
Certainly working in a private practice in a community, I see all kinds of things, but in terms of things I'm a specialist in, those are the two.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
And I also specialize in trauma, like we mentioned before. I also love working with grief, and we can talk
Yeah.
a little bit later if you want about traumatic grief
Yes.
and
Write that
the
down.
intersection between trauma and grief. It's something I find very passionate about. even just talking about it right now, I felt myself getting emotional because it is a really hard thing to sit in a room with somebody who has experienced traumatic grief.
Yeah.
And it's also like a big honor to be in the room
Present.
and helping somebody through that journey, but I can feel in my body so clearly.
Yeah.
It's been a really meaningful subsection of a population that I've really gravitated towards lately, and something I really love to do. I work with all ages. So I work with all ages, I would say, from 5 up.
Wow.
As far
Okay.
as
Even
working,
pediatric. Okay.
yes, definitely. We work with a lot of, I think, children with grief as well, and trauma. And that's something we're very proud of. I also like to do really looking at a mind-body approach. So really studying energy psychology and somatic experiencing and understanding how the emotions exist inside our body. And so not just looking at our mind and our thoughts and our cognitions, which are just as important as
but
our
physical
emotions,
manifestations
the
too.
physical manifestations as well. So when somebody's looking for that kind of approach where they said, I've tried this, but this didn't work. Can you do something different with me? I sometimes get excited at that opportunity to kind of go into the body first.
Oh, that's
and
fabulous.
address how the trauma lives inside the body.
So we keep saying trauma. Can you guys define what trauma is and isn't?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So there's all different definitions.
Right.
And really, I mean, we could have the clinical definition, but it's not so much the thing that happens to you, right? That would be like a traumatic experience, right? Whether it's a big trauma, like things we think about, like a car accident or things like that. And then those tend to be big T traumas, rape, things like that, tend to be one-time events or, very few events. Whereas little T traumas are things like bullying and chronic stress, response to life situations, like divorce and things like that. But when we think of trauma, there's really a difference between person A who went through a car accident and had no symptoms and person B who they would define their car accident as a trauma because of how it felt and what types of behavioral manifestations you had afterwards. So it's really, I'm always very careful in a session if someone is using the word my trauma or I had a trauma, I'm not going to nitpick at all and validate them. So trauma is really
personal experience.
And it's usually defined, the kind of technical term is something outside of the realm of what we would expect.
That has a long lasting impact. We're really looking at something, that has imprinted on your nervous system, on your ability to feel safe in this world, on the ability to cope with life. So that's when we know that actually a trauma has occurred, if there's that long lasting impact. Versus like an adverse event, which can also be in the moment very shocking and disorganizing, but maybe it doesn't carry the same imprint on your belief systems.
Long term. Is there a misconception with trauma?
I mean, I don't know. How would you answer that?
I mean, nowadays, the word is being thrown around a lot more. So I think we have to be careful not to identify too much with, I have all these traumas and I've been traumatized, because you're also giving your power away to an event or another person. So I do think in that way, it's important sometimes that we clarify with a client or individual what is a trauma, what's not a trauma. But at the same time,
to them,
like Andrea was saying, it's really about how that experience imprinted on their emotions. And so if they identify as a trauma, we're probably going to dig a little deeper and see if there are any secondary gains there. Are they benefiting from saying I have this trauma? Or is there truly this long-lasting impact and this person really needs the healing that we can provide through therapy?
So you said about throwing words around. So there's another word that's being thrown around all the time, intergenerational trauma. Can you tell us what intergenerational trauma is? Can we because everybody just sort of like uses it loosely.
Absolutely.
And I imagine we all have some.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Exactly.
Absolutely. None of us have escaped that.
No, definitely not. So it's a really interesting field, and I think something that more recently has gotten attention, and that's probably why you're hearing it as a buzzword. But there's a bunch of different things related to intergenerational trauma. And it's really what it says, which is you can have a life that you're not identifying as having trauma in it. But your relatives, both your relatives that are genetic relatives and just relatives that maybe you live
proximity,
with
yeah.
in proximity, their traumas, especially if they're not processed, can be filtered down to you.
Right.
And they can be filtered down to you in a number of ways. And there's kind of more emerging research that's really cool and exciting about it as well. But it can be passed down through genetics.
Really, from genetics,
From
not just like
genetics.
continued microaggressions or like
No.
dumping, but from genetics as well.
So through genetics and then behavior, whether that's being exposed to hearing about your parents' trauma or your grandparents' trauma,
Sure.
or having your parents or grandparents' trauma impact how they parent you, right?
100%.
So like a mother who was traumatized, let's say a victim of sexual assault or sexual abuse, might be very protective of their daughters because they don't want that same experience to befall them. But actually, there is a whole new field emerging where they are even talking about the genetic material passed down
That's
from a
fascinating to me.
great grandmother
On a cellular level.
at a cellular level.
Wow.
Because when a female child is born, they are born with all of the eggs that they will have in their lifetime. So you imagine if that child with their eggs has a trauma, those eggs are going to become potentially other children.
Right.
And so even the transmission of that genetic material, there's a lot of research from the Holocaust.
Sure.
Specifically.
Sure.
So it's a really emerging and interesting field, but both the genetic and the behavioral components.
Sure. Oh, wow. That's fascinating. Okay. So, how does that different from other traumatic events? Because you talked about there's different sorts of traumas. There's the big T's and the little T's. So we talked about intergenerational. Can you tell us a little bit some of the other traumas?
I think we can differentiate between what we call like a simple trauma, which is a one-time event.
So an acute situation kind of thing.
So like a car accident, for example, is one that most people can relate to. And then there's complex trauma. So complex trauma often occurs in the context of a relationship, but it's more of the ongoing trauma, and it could look like neglect. It could look like poverty. It could look like abuse, mistreatment, ongoing sexual assault. So it's something that is ongoing.
Right.
And like I said, it doesn't have to exist within a relationship, but oftentimes it does. And what we find is that when it does exist within a relationship, those are the ones that have the most profound, long-lasting impact on the individual.
Yeah.
Because relationships are meant to keep us safe.
Right.
And the differentiation with something that's just bad that happens to you and something that's traumatic is that it disrupts your sense of safety in this world.
Yeah, sure.
And so that's something we see a lot, especially when people are not being able as adults to be in a healthy relationship as well. So
you really have a spectrum of levels as far as intensities and stuff like that.
Yes.
Okay.
But I think something that's really important to think about is, and Andrea mentioned it before, is that whether it's a big T or a little t really depends on the person's risk factors when the trauma occurred. And when we talk about risk factors, we're talking about their nervous system regulation, their support system, their internal and external resources, the environment they grew up in, the culture that they grew up in. All of that really determines and impacts if somebody's trauma is going to be a big T or a little t. So we like to look at the risk factors as a way to also help prepare and prevent people who might go through a trauma in the future, saying, okay, these are the risk factors. So then what are the protective factors? Right. And really diving deep and saying, okay, so trauma is likely to happen to all of us.
Sure.
So if we know that there are these risk factors that make you more susceptible to a long-lasting impact for trauma, how can we up kids, especially their protective factors? How can we help them have stronger belief systems that they can handle hard things? How can they have better coping skills? Making sure that they know how to ask for help, confidence, feeling strong, having more support, and those kind of things.
And just building resilience.
Yeah.
One of the things that is a huge protective factor. So we know, as much as we would like to bubble wrap our kids and keep them safe and make sure, nothing in this big bad world happens to them, things are going to happen, right? And so teaching them, we always say, wouldn't it be nice if like in preschool, before life gets to
Right.
them, that we could kind of teach everyone a package of coping
Yeah.
skills, because
Wouldn't that
hard
be
things are going to
nice?
happen, right? But there are also things that, while we can't prevent things from happening, specifically in the area of sexual abuse, one of the number one predictive factors of whether a child is going to be okay, and I want to kind of put an exclamation mark on this.
Okay.
If your listeners hear nothing today,
Okay.
other
Yeah.
than
This is the main takeaway.
this is one of the main takeaways, is that the first person they tell, if they believe them, that prognostically sets them up for success.
That's it.
Versus the contrary, if they are not believed, they can, of course, be successful. We have
Right.
great interventions,
Right.
but you're really setting your child up for success if you believe them.
Right.
I have had cases where sexual abuse was minor. And what I mean by that is there's a full range, just like everything
Right.
else,
Right.
but something that was non-contact, maybe they had to watch something or see
Right.
something their brains weren't ready to see. So there was not what we consider extreme
Right.
sexual abuse, but they told someone and they brushed it off and didn't believe it. And then I've had someone who has had what we would consider extreme sexual abuse, which for trigger warning purposes, I won't get into.
Yeah.
But they were believed by the first person who they were told.
Which makes a huge difference.
That person, even though they didn't have as severe of abuse content, will do better and has done better. I've seen it time and time again.
Amazing.
So the good news is, even though we can't prevent
Right,
always, of
right,
course we
right.
do a lot. There's a lot of prevention work
Right.
about safety and body safety and things like that. But if we can't prevent it, we can intervene immediately, and prognostically it changes things. And
So when you talk about, sorry, I didn't mean to
No, go
interrupt you,
ahead.
but you were saying that we talk about prevention. Do you go out to schools? Is it just with your patients, or how are you getting out there to teach people better coping skills and prevention skills? And
So we don't do it personally. Christie House does have
Okay.
a lot of their grants, and there are children's advocacy centers all over the country. And
Right.
one of their missions, of course, is to help with children who have already experienced trauma.
Right.
But there's a big prevention piece also that
Okay,
they do in schools.
That's what I want to know from prevention. Okay.
Absolutely. And then in sessions for people who have been victims, we do some of that future prevention, but it's very strategic and tricky, because in that therapeutic intervention, we want to make sure the thinking isn't, well, if you did this, that wouldn't have happened to you.
No, because then it's
Right.
blame.
So it's tricky,
Right.
but we are careful. We do all kinds of, like, I guess, creative things. Like we bring
What types of
hula hoops
therapies and modalities do you use?
You wanna-
You said hula hoops. Like,
Yes,
tell me.
yes. So we do hula hoops and balloons, really fun,
Right.
child-friendly things to explain personal space. And then
Oh,
you have to
okay,
ask
good.
someone if they
May
can come
I?
into your personal space. So
I like
it's
that.
not all like serious,
Right.
it's play
Right.
with little ones.
Yeah.
So I wanted to jump on. Ooh, just hit the microphone. One more thing, because I love that you gave a takeaway for whoever's
Yeah.
listening, about making sure that a child or an adult is believed when they come
Yeah.
forth and finally get the courage to talk about the trauma. But there's something that's really cool that's also important to talk about, which is memory consolidation. So every time you tell a memory,
I'm writing
you
this down.
open up the window
Mm-hmm.
that the memory occurred. So memories are not fixed.
Okay.
They are adaptive. They are meant to be adaptive. They are malleable. So every time I recall something and share with somebody a memory, a window opens. So if a child comes and tells their parent, or finally gets the courage to say, this thing happened to me, that memory of the difficult thing that happened to them is open, and it's open for about 6 hours.
Oh, really?
So this is an important thing, whether it's somebody recalling a memory or something for parents and caregivers to know. If there isn't a trauma, you have 6 hours after the trauma that meant that the cement is still wet. So yes, this bad thing happened, but can I show up with a lot of compassion? Can I show up and help the child or the person feel so resilient? Can I empower them to know that even though this difficult thing happened,
Yeah.
they are going to be able to get through it, and
They'll be
provide them those
okay.
resources and give them that support, so that when that memory does harden, and it doesn't harden permanently, but
Right.
it does harden after those 6 hours, that trauma is with now this lens of, even though this hard thing happened, I am believed, I'm validated, I'm seen, I'm supportive,
Supported.
I'm loved, I am strong.
I will be okay.
So that's really important. But what normally happens after a trauma is everyone is in panic, everyone is in crisis. Whoever experienced the trauma a lot of times has a lot of fear, shame, vulnerability, powerlessness. And that's what gets cemented and kind of
Right.
filed away with that trauma.
Uh-huh.
So as important it is to believe somebody when they come, it's also like thinking about, okay, not to invalidate them, obviously,
right.
and not to be like, don't worry, you're going to be okay.
Right.
Like, you're strong, you can handle this. But really making sure, though, that they
Have the
feel
tools.
they have the tools and they feel empowered and they feel like they have the support. Because that is really what, in the future, we need to be turning off the alarm bells that the trauma has occurred inside our brain. And our alarm bells often don't get turned off if we believe that we're not safe and we're
Right.
not going to be safe again in the future.
Right.
So
Right.
really using that time. And so as a segue into what type of therapies we do,
Uh-huh.
Andrea and I do a lot of similar therapy and therapeutic interventions. And then we have areas that we differ just because of our passions, right? We're in a really amazing time right now. There's so many new trauma interventions coming out, so many empirically supported interventions that really help. There's therapies called top-down approaches and bottom-up approaches, and we do that a little bit
tell us
differently.
more about
so
that.
I do a bottom-up approach mainly, and she does a top approach mainly. They're both important. They're both needed. They integrate beautifully with one another, and it really goes to a lot of times the client, what the client's needs are. But so I was talking a lot about memory because my favorite trauma treatment really works on the reconsolidation of a memory associated with a trauma.
Okay.
And it's called accelerated resolution therapy,
Okay.
or ART.
Okay.
And it comes from EMDR, which is a very popular trauma treatment that's been around for a while. And ART is a newer version of EMDR. And we're really looking at that traumatic memories hold the emotional charge. It's almost like that trauma is frozen in time inside your body, inside your amygdala, inside your mind. And through these treatments where we utilize moving your eyes from side to side, which is called bilateral simulation, and it helps open up the memory. And then once the memory is open, we can release the emotional charge that's stuck there. And then you get to go back and using your secure self now and rewrite the story. Because a lot of times trauma writes the story, right? Something bad happens to us and it writes the story. It definitely imprints on our belief system, how we see the world, how we see ourselves, how safe we feel. And now with the windows open and you're recalling this memory and you're exposing yourself to something really scary, but you get to take control over it and you get to take power over it and say, how do I want to refile this in my mind?
Right.
So that's the type of therapy that I do, which kind of goes through the body first. It's quieting the emotional charge, right? Helping that nervous system regulate and finally feel safe. What we know is our brain is wired for safety. And it's also wired for healing, which is why what we do is so powerful, because people really can heal.
Yeah.
But we have to feel safe first. So once our body feels safe, then you can go into the cognitions and the thoughts and the belief systems, and you get to take ownership of your story, which Andrea's going to tell a little bit about
So
what she
that's
does. That's bottom up. It's kind of going through the body
to
first,
the brain.
and then rewriting your story, taking control of the narrative is what Andrea does more of, which is why it's so beautiful, because then it becomes this empowering experience.
Puzzle pieces that fit together.
Yeah. You want to talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
sure. So what I do is something called TFCBT, which is trauma focused CBT.
Okay.
And so
And for our listeners, CBT is cognitive
cognitive
behavioral therapy.
therapy.
I just wanted to define for context. So
exactly. So CBT is really the most evidence-based treatment in mental health interventions right now. There's certainly a ton of different interventions, but really the idea, because I want to give a little education of that first. The idea behind CBT is there's something called the CBT triangle. And the idea is that your thoughts and the way you're talking to yourself, thinking about and talking to yourself about anything impacts how you feel and how you behave. And so if we can tweak and change, not invalidate, but tweak the way we're thinking and talking to ourselves about something, it can impact how we feel and how we act.
100%.
So then where trauma focused CBT comes in is there's a whole bunch of steps. including learning how to regulate mood and affect and how to cope, emotional coping. And then there's cognitive coping, which is the CBT part of it,
Right.
working with your thoughts and challenging dysfunctional or thoughts that are not serving
Right.
you. And then there's the trauma narrative portion. The trauma narrative, much like art, is reconsolidating or restoring in a different way the way the trauma occurred. And
Got
so
it.
when you are in active trauma, you are in survival mode, you are in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and they keep adding more
Right,
F's
right,
to
right,
it
right, right,
as
right.
we become more knowledgeable
Right.
about all the processes. So the way it gets encoded is kind of fear-based and survival-based.
Yeah.
But when you're in therapy, especially after you've done relationship building, learned to cope, learned to think about things differently, and you're safe in an office with someone you care about,
Right.
when you open up that trauma, it can get stored differently. And we
Right.
actually, as we store it, we separate the emotion and the physiological reaction from the actual story
Right.
and the narrative. And so I've kind of come up with, I don't even know if I've shared this with you, with my students, I do kind of an interesting thing with the trauma narrative. So a traditional trauma narrative that you can do with children, that you do with adults, is you have them write their story of the actual trauma with details, with sensory information, what the room looked like, what clothes you were wearing or not wearing, what the temperature felt like, really getting into
Wow.
the details.
All the senses of everything.
All of the senses, what you were thinking, what you were feeling, and you write it out, usually like a sentence at a time. And we do really protective things during that. So
Right.
we take ratings of something called a SUDS, which is a subjective unit of distress.
Okay.
And it's usually, some people do 1 to 100, some people do 1 to 10. But either way, the child, let's say, would say a sentence. I'd be writing down exactly what they say. And I'd say, on
And
a
then you
scale of
rate
1
it?
to 10, how
Okay.
are you feeling?
Uh-huh.
So not rating the narrative, but rating the feeling.
Right. The emotion.
And so we do, there's, with every story, right? There's a before, a during, and an after.
Sure.
So we will do the before,
Okay.
and then we'll read it a bunch of times. And we'll read it walking around the room. We'll read it sitting back to back. We'll read it in a singing voice until that SUDS level for the before
Right.
goes down to something manageable.
Okay.
And while we're doing this, the child or the adult is starting to regulate and get used to what the process is.
Got it.
Then I do something mixed up. And in my trauma training group, we actually use an Alice in Wonderland analogy. So we call this Mad Hatter style.
Okay.
So we do the before,
Uh-huh.
we leave the actual trauma to the side.
Okay.
And then we do the story or the narrative
Okay.
of the after. And we read it and we take SUDS ratings the same way. And then we put it together. So it's the before and the after, or then the after and the before, Mad Hatter style.
Right, right, right.
So it's all mixed up, but it's getting reconsolidated into the brain as this is a silly thing.
Right.
We've
We're
had
processing
kids
it
do
differently, yeah.
karaoke version.
Oh,
Then,
really? Wow.
then we add the during. Now, by then, they've already done all of these wacky, mixed up Mad Hatter things. They know that I'm never going to let their SUDS get so high that they're so dysregulated and distressed.
Right.
So then we do the actual trauma, but it doesn't even seem as like,
As
dun,
traumatic?
dun, dun,
Yeah.
here we go,
Mhm.
because they know the process.
Right.
And then we keep mixing it up Mad Hatter style
Brilliant.
until the SUDS is lower. And then we do White Rabbit style, which is in the correct order.
Okay.
So by now, at this point, they're like, I am so sick of
Right,
saying,
right,
saying
right,
these
right,
words.
right, right.
We've said this
I'm done.
sentence
I'm
200
done.
times.
Yeah.
But guess what? The emotion is detached from it.
Right.
And it's just a narrative that who had control over it? They did.
Right.
Versus when they were
It controlled them.
victimized,
Mhm.
someone else had control.
Right.
And I think why something that's so beautiful about that is that when we have a trauma, and we can talk about PTSD, which is the disorder of when a trauma, your threshold for handling that trauma has become so significant that you're not able to function, that our go-to strategy to to protect ourselves is avoidance.
Right.
And in your strategy, you're not letting them avoid it
Right.
at all, right? So then after a while, it's that exposure to maybe I don't have to live in fear of this
Right.
thing, or maybe I don't have to have this thing have so much power over me. I can change my relationship with the trauma. And I think as long as you're avoiding talking about the trauma, and that's why therapy is so important, or, reliving or thinking about the trauma, you're sending a message to your brain that this thing is so scary and I'm so terrified about this and it was so bad that I could never think about it again.
Right.
I can't talk about it. I can't share it with anyone.
But then it's all you can think
Right.
about.
Right. So because the brain wants us to heal.
Right.
Right. So why does the brain bring us those distressing images? Why does the brain create those nightmares at night? The brain is saying, hey,
We got to deal with this.
we got to deal with this. We got to process this. There is strength. And I think it's like recognizing that we are built to adapt. We are adaptable. And in order to adapt, we need to go through the difficult situations.
I think more people need to know that and understand that, because I don't think people realize what you just said, that we are adaptable and we have the power to adapt.
Yes.
Because a lot of people are functioning in just that moment and dealing with the now and not thinking about, oh, I have the ability to help myself.
Yeah. I think an interesting thing that we see a lot, and we talk about it a lot with adults, is a lot of times adults will come to us and they'll say, I had this trauma when I was a child, but I thought I was over it. I never think about it anymore. It's not really bothering me. And now I'm happy. I'm in a healthy relationship. I have a good job. Everything's great. And now all of a sudden I'm having flashbacks and nightmares are keeping me up all night. And why is this coming back now?
Right.
And it's like, oh, it's coming back now. One, because your body's finally feels safe
To
address it. But the brain is, like we said, so adaptable. When you're in survival mode, your brain does protect you from dealing with more of these challenging, triggering situations, because it's trying to just help you survive. Once you're out of survival mode, your brain's like, wait, hold on. We're here to evolve.
Yeah.
So we need to go back and find the lesson in that trauma. Where is the strength? Where is that like missing piece of there's resources that we can really access and integrate from a trauma that will help you be a better version of yourself. But it's always, I think, very alarming to people that are saying, well, why now? Like,
yeah.
oh, no.
Why is this coming back up? I want to go back to what you said about like that 6-hour window. So how does a loved one, especially if you're dealing with a pediatric person who's had trauma, how does a loved one identify, oh, wait, this child has this opportunity right now that they can help themselves by them taking them to a therapist and dealing with the trauma that they've been exposed to or experienced? So how does a loved one identify? Because a lot of children don't always come home and say, oh, this is what happened to me. Sometimes they're just trying to process it themselves. So how can a parent make that assessment and say, oh, I think something's happened?
Like, what are the symptoms that a child might be exhibiting that something is wrong?
Yeah.
So we really look to behavior change or personality change. So if your child, let's say in the case of bullying, for example, if your child usually gets in the car and is talking about their day and has a certain, what are we having for a snack or where are we going or can we set up a play date, and they get in the car and they just put their head down.
Oh, their affect's completely different.
Their affect's completely different. That doesn't mean they were traumatized, but
something's happening.
Something's happening that's worthy of asking. And I don't want the message to be that, parents only have a 6-hour window, and if you miss it, your child is destined for some
but
problems.
there has to be some way they can identify some of the symptoms.
Exactly.
But every time we talk about a memory, the 6 hour, so there's so many opportunities.
Yeah.
There's like as many as you want.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because we're constantly thinking.
Right.
So each new time is an opportunity to address it.
And yes, we're talking about a lot of traumas, but because we specialize in, in child sexual abuse and things like that, a lot of those types of traumas also inherent have secrecy. And sometimes
shame.
There's shame. There's threats of, don't tell anybody or this will happen. So more likely than not, it takes a while.
Right.
Even if if it's not chronic and it only happens once, it takes a while. You have to have a lot of courage.
Sure.
And so it's okay. And it is not a parental failure
No.
or a systemic
No.
failure if you don't see the signs, because some kids don't show any signs.
Right.
Some adults don't show any signs.
Right.
And what that means is the resilience is really kicking in and they're really showing up like they did before.
Okay.
Something I want to make sure that we have time, that when Summer and I were talking about coming on this podcast, that was really important to us is trauma is so heavy, and it seems like, oh my goodness, like what if we can't prevent things from happening to us or the people we love? Not only are we resilient, not only are there fantastic and more everyday interventions that are working and evidence-based and researched, but there's actually a really cool concept called post-traumatic growth.
Okay. Tell me.
That is a concept where it is not the doomsday. If something bad happens to you, you are doomed to a life of therapy or a
Right.
life of challenges. Having things happen to you that are adverse events can actually build a really strong character.
Right.
We talk about this all the time.
Make you more resilient.
And make you more resilient. So it's not like, yay, let's run out and have
No.
some traumas.
No.
But I think it's such a positive way to look at the lens of there's a lot we can't control in this world, especially with media and politics and everything the way it is now. Rather than try and insulate ourselves, can we get excited about, yes, we can prevent, yes, we can intervene, but also
Coping.
we are incredible humans. Our brains are beautiful.
Right.
There's so much wonderful within us and between us that works so well that we don't.
I think the between us is missing a lot lately.
Yes,
So
exactly. And we had thrown around the term protective factors. One of the things that separates people who have had an adverse event but become traumatized or diagnosable with PTSD and someone who's okay is really protective factors. Things like safety, security, but mostly social and family support.
Yeah.
We are human beings for a reason, right? And so having people around us and having a social support system that maybe it's not who you think it is. Maybe it's not your mom or your sister, but maybe it's the lady down the street or a teacher
or a best friend.
And so another thing that we can do to bolster people's protective factors in case they have an event is to build up their social support network.
Okay, so I was going to ask you a little bit about like if someone's suffered a traumatic event, how do they begin to heal? So having that support system and coming to you, is there a difference between when you work on healing with someone? Is there a difference between like a mental trauma and a physical trauma? Because you talked about like car accidents, or you talked about sexual abuse, or like.
I mean, I think that there's no way to separate them, right? A physical trauma is going to include some emotional trauma. And a lot of times we think of depression, for example, or extreme angst almost as a pain, right? It's a painful emotion. The word trauma, it's a Greek word that means wound. Right. So whether it's an emotional wound or a physical wound, it's a long-lasting impact of that wound on the person's
Even the
nervous
word
system.
is sort of scary itself.
Trauma.
No, when you talk about it, some people are like, oh.
So I think it's like whether it's a physical or an emotional trauma, therapy, rehabilitation, having social support. I think a physical wound also impacts the nervous system and our ability to feel safe. And so there's going to be a focus on healing the nervous system, whether it's physical or emotional. And one of the beautiful things, if you're looking at how do I regulate my nervous system, right? It's a buzzword right now, or buzzwords. Everyone's talking about it, which is really awesome. But the quickest and easiest way to regulate your nervous system is through social engagement. It's through social support. So going back to how important a hug, right?
Oh, yeah.
A eye contact, a glance, somebody just touching you, holding space for you. Immediately it sends a signal to your nervous system that you are safe.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for those people who maybe do not have social support and are going to go through maybe healing or want to start doing the work, maybe joining a support group, right? And you can go online and find lots of now with virtual support groups, a lot of free support groups. And I think that's probably an important component because I do think it's kind of hard.
I think nowadays everybody's isolated. So I think that's a huge component. But what happens when you're working with a patient and they're doing very well, but they have a moment of panic or anxiety or maybe a little bit of a relapse? You talk about our brains. They're brilliant. They want us to heal, and adaptability. So how do you help a client get over that sort of hump or relapse, let's say.
You're talking about like in the moment they have like a
Yeah.
rise of
Yes.
physiological
Yes.
symptoms, maybe
Yes.
rapid heart rate, things like
Mhm,
that.
mhm.
That's when the bottom up approach really works.
Okay.
Breathing, yoga, body work.
Okay. So more of a physical.
Andrea and I both in our sessions almost are accounting for that there's a window of tolerance, right? That we, for the most part, are trying to keep our client when they're processing these. We don't want them to be re-traumatized when they're talking about it. Now,
Sure.
if they do start experiencing these intense emotions and this reactivation, we have strategies that we both use. For example, we both use hot stones. We love hot stones.
Oh, I like that right now.
And so we
That
have
sounds
those.
good.
And hot stones, when you're holding them, right? The warmth is really nurturing. It's very grounding.
Right.
We have weighted blankets that our clients are using. So we're making sure that while they're talking about this really activating event, that their body is in a state of calm.
Okay, so these are great because I was thinking, like, what happens when it becomes too overwhelming? I like the hot stones and the blankets.
We also have container exercises, which is a beautiful
that?
thing. So no matter who comes through our door, if they're going to be talking about trauma, we're going to teach them some sort of container exercise. And depending on the therapist, that might look different. And that could be, okay, we're going to talk about this really difficult thing. When we're done, until next week, we're going to put this trauma until it's fully processed and you
Into
feel
a
really
container.
into a container. And
Brilliant.
that could be like imagining in your head a mason jar
Right.
or a box, or some people will imagine a box on the bookshelf
Right.
or say, let's
Filing
put it,
cabinet.
yes.
A drawer.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And so sometimes
that.
trauma therapy is just about opening up the drawer and looking and saying, okay, my trauma's in that drawer. And at some point, I'm going to be talking to Andrea about it. But for now, I'm going to keep it in that
Right,
drawer.
yeah.
And that's an exposure, right?
Yeah.
And that just helps the nerves prepare the nervous system to say, okay, we're going to be doing this and it's safe.
Right.
And if it gets too much, I put it back in the drawer.
Right, I'll
I
deal with
close
it then.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think Summer said something earlier that I think needs more emphasis,
Okay.
which is our natural response to something scary or traumatic happening is to push it down.
Sure.
Right. And we've all, and you talk about generational transmission of things, probably our grandmothers and our mothers, when something bad happened, if they didn't know how to deal with it, they'd say, just forget about it. Or,
Right.
But as we know,
Or they dumped their traumas on us.
Exactly. Then there's
Either
that.
way.
Then there's that. And I think, like Summer had said, sometimes, usually when we're safe and things are going well and it's really confusing, all of
Yeah.
a sudden symptoms will pop
comes
up.
up, yeah.
But I think we really, as trauma therapists, have so much faith in what we do and the
Yeah.
interventions and the softness with which we
Right.
approach it, that it doesn't have to be scary.
Right.
And it can be something that can feel really empowering to finally just let's see the light of day.
I love that.
And one of my favorite ways that you reminded me with the like opening it up, peeking in and being like, no, not yet.
Yeah.
And how that's an
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exposure. I will oftentimes have the person sitting across from me, whether it's a child or whoever it is, write in really light pencil the name or the title of the person who did the thing to them. And then we just we talk about what they're doing this weekend, what their favorite toy to play with is, but that name very faintly is always kind of present
Right.
there. And sometimes based on what we know about the trauma response, we won't even put like the primary name. We'll put
Right,
the kid that lives in the yellow house
Right,
or whatever it is, but so we don't engage in avoidance.
Right.
There's always a part of the trauma
That's present.
that's present.
Yeah.
So, for example,
But lightly present.
but lightly present. So, same thing with grief work. Even
Yeah.
if you're not ready to process the
Oh,
grief,
yeah.
maybe having the name of the person
Yeah.
who passed away just somewhere, or mentioning at least once, so it's that exposure, but it's so
Right.
gentle and subtle that you almost can't.
Not re-traumatizing.
Right. Exactly.
So you talk about grief and things like that, and I always think about grief comes in waves. You're never really, you just sort of accept a new normal. But what do you do with a patient who has that sort of PTSD situation?
So I love that you said the grief comes in waves, because
Yeah.
I think that's another sign of how adaptable we really are as humans. So
Right.
grief is the one emotion that you cannot escape.
Right.
Every other emotion, we really could, displace it to somebody else, push it down,
No.
pretend like it doesn't exist. No, your body and your heart is going to say, no, no, no.
Yeah.
We have this, and it's a beautiful thing, right? And it's
Right.
so difficult to go through, but the fact that your body has this natural way of healing.
Mm-hmm.
So when we take that grief, but then we put a trauma on top of the grief, when that loss occurred
Mm-hmm.
in a traumatic, shocking, horrific, unexpected way, a lot of times the trauma prevents the person from being able to go through those natural stages of grief. And we know that grief never goes away and you're
Right.
processing it forever, but it changes, right?
Right.
And it can be, I guess, less damaging at times when
Right.
you kind of make peace with it. But we really need to work on that trauma, because the trauma is making you relive
Right.
Mm-hmm.
that thing that you're trying to make peace with
Right.
over and over again through a lens of this wasn't safe, this shouldn't have happened, right? It really
Right.
blocks you. Right? So much of grief healing is an acceptance piece.
Right.
And it's really hard when there's a trauma involved to accept that something happened in the way that
Right.
it happened and you weren't expecting it, or it shouldn't have happened in that way.
Right.
So
And I think what both of you said, going through it,
Yeah.
because working through it, and that instead of avoiding it,
Yeah.
because when we talk about grief coming in waves and things like that, there's little moments and big moments. So it can be like holidays, like big times when
Yeah.
you get together and you're missing
Mhm.
someone, or it can be just a song that you hear. But if you're in the moment, I think the further away you get from that loss, and this is my experience, the further away you get from that loss, you can kind of say, okay, I've had that moment. I've recognized it. I accept the loss. I am going to move forward with this knowledge. Maybe it was a visit. Maybe it was whatever you want to describe it, but that you can process it and still move forward, and like just have that balance when it's big or little.
learning to surf it.
Yeah.
Right?
Surf, that's
And
great.
we have
That's
the hand
exactly.
brain, by the way. I was just
Learning
gonna say
to
that.
surf
But when
it.
there's a
That's
trauma,
brilliant.
you're not surfing, you're drowning.
No, yeah.
So
You're struggling to get up
You're
above the
struggling.
ward
Right.
of water, excuse me.
So
yeah.
I think that's a tricky thing. One of the things with the type of therapy that I enjoy doing, art therapy, is that there is a built-in mechanism when you're moving your eyes from side to side, these bilateral movements with your eyes. It's integrating the right and left hemisphere of your brain that helps you process the memories and release the emotional charge, but it also really helps heal your nervous system.
Mhm.
So and I'm sure Andrea has had the same experience. A lot of times people do not come to talk to us about trauma because they are so scared
Right.
that it is going to be so upsetting when they finally
Right.
go in and we
Right.
let them know you're going to be telling the details of
Yeah,
the trauma.
yeah,
And so like wanting everyone to know that no matter what type of trauma therapy is out there, there are safeguards.
Yeah, you have a
Mhm.
safe space for
For
them.
sure. And we know, like Andrew said, there's a softness to it.
Right.
We're protecting them. We're utilizing these other interventions to make sure that they're not re-traumatizing themselves and
Yeah.
feeling the emotions. But the emotions are trapped. They're
Yeah.
frozen inside our body, and all feelings want to be felt. They all want to be released.
Right.
So having this opportunity to finally feel your feelings and release them and move forward and move through it, like you
right,
said,
right, right.
I think is the goal. But that can be really scary. But I want people to know, as scary as it is, we do our best to make it not so scary.
Yeah.
The other thing about trauma therapy is I don't want the impression to be that if you have a trauma, it's impacted your life, you're fighting against yourself because you don't really want to talk about it. And you're like, I'm going to find myself a trauma therapist, that you are going to walk in from the waiting room and from the minute the session starts until it ends, you're talking about trauma. Absolutely not.
Right.
It kind of looks like, and I'm big with analogies, as an Oreo cookie.
Mm-hmm.
So the first chocolate wafer is the kind of walking in, how was your
Mhm,
week,
mhm.
exchanging pleasantries, talking about things that went on,
Right. The small talk.
the small talk, right? And then the second wafer is kind of the wrapping up, what's going on next week, what are you doing when you
Right.
leave here, do you have any dinner plans, all of that kind of stuff. The middle, which is the
good mushy
the
part.
good mushy part, sometimes is a thin
Yeah.
stuffed Oreo, and sometimes it's a
A
double
double
stuffed
stuffed.
Oreo,
Sorry.
right?
I like cookies.
Right. And so we all love a cookie analogy, right? And so really the beginning of trauma therapy, or
Right.
if there's any activating things going on that are unrelated to the trauma, but like you're just not in the mood to do a deep
Right.
dive into your trauma. I mean,
Right.
who would be signing up for that?
Yeah.
is a very thin part of the filling of the Oreo.
Got it.
And so it's all a very fluid,
Mhm.
controlled
Right.
thing. And I will have people come in because that's the language I use. And they'll be like, there's no filling today. We're just doing
Right.
wafers. And I'm
Right.
like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
But I don't let them do that long because
Right.
then that's avoidance.
Right.
And so there's a balance. But I think
I think you need to know your clients and know what they need and understand them. You two are
Right.
exceptional. So
between and within sessions too.
yeah, sure.
So,
So how do you make sure? Well, first of all, I'm so impressed that we've got these many modalities and so much more information and so much more science-based stuff. Because you said art therapy, which is what I used to do with children 30 plus some odd years ago. And I'm thinking, my God, we never had the kind of resources and information and things that you're doing. What you're doing is spectacular. It's amazing. It makes me want to get back into it. But how do we make sure that these traumas don't define them? Are these modalities that just happen in there? Or are they building the tools to take it with them forward?
So it's definitely a skill building, tool building type of therapy. We spend an inordinate amount of time on coping skills.
Right.
And the good news is it's really going back to giving power to the client. And so really
Right.
saying,
Not the event.
you don't need to, this is something that happened to you. This is not you.
Got it.
You are not someone who is a traumatized individual. You are someone who has experienced trauma
Right.
and has had symptoms,
Right.
and you know how to treat them.
Right. You're not walking around with a message board that says,
Exactly
I am
not.
this.
Exactly
yeah.
not.
And how would you like to file it away
Yeah.
now, right?
Yeah.
And so really being conscious, how do I want to feel about it? And
Right.
how do I want this trauma to shape me or not to shape me
Right.
going forward? There's an intervention in accelerated resolution therapy, and it's called the New Perspective Store. And you take your client to the New Perspective Store, and you really help them now take ownership of that story. And it's really empowering and saying, what is the perspective now I want to take,
Right.
you know, when I look back at this thing that happened to me. And so I think for sure, anyone who's doing trauma therapy, they would probably say that there's a big part of empowerment. Like we
Right.
want our clients to leave empowered.
Right.
And if that's how they leave the session, we did our job.
Right.
Yep.
Is it critical for loved ones to know what's critical for loved ones to know in order to be supportive and helping? Because they see you X amount of times a week or however often they go, but they're going home. So how can loved ones assist?
So the biggest thing I say to loved ones is open the door.
Mm-hmm.
They may not walk through it.
Right.
Let them know if they want to talk about what happened in session, if they want to, if they want to share what happened in their session, if they want to share insights, that they have agency
Right.
over that. And
Right.
so to really just make statements, especially early on, like, I'm so proud of you
Right.
that you're engaging in this therapy. It is yours. I
Right.
certainly am here if you want to talk to me about it, but
Right.
also I respect if you don't.
Got it.
One of the, not required, but one of the components of trauma-focused CBT, which is really special and challenging, is once the child has that trauma narrative written, we like to, with the child's permission, share it with the parent.
Got it.
And the way we do it is we share it with the parent without the child there first, because we want to have the
we want to
parent.
make sure the parent's emotions and physical
Exactly.
reaction don't traumatize the
That,
child again.
and we want to give that parent the
Time to process.
the time to process it,
Yeah.
however it's going to
Yeah.
naturally come
Yeah.
out, and then to talk about how they would like to show up for their child and what they need
Got it.
from the therapist to help them show up like that. Sometimes we have them hold things, sometimes we have them sit on their hands,
Yeah.
sometimes whatever it is. And then we will have the child, if they want to do it like that. Remember, everything is up to the child.
Yeah.
Or the adult, because we
Right.
do this with adults too, share it with the parent.
Oof.
A lot of times, and that's why I said it's not a required component, a lot of times it's too hard.
Right.
But at some point, because the trauma narrative will be theirs, they can
Right.
leave with it. They can share it when they're older.
Right.
But a lot of times we do something called a Gestalt exercise, which you probably remember,
Yeah.
where we will have them tell it to a teddy bear or tell it to an empty chair or something like that. So they still get the benefit of sharing it. It
Right.
takes away some of the shame,
Expressing it.
but they don't have to worry. There's a lot of really sweet kids who are so protective over their parent that they don't want to engage in that, and that's okay too. But to answer your question, it's really just continuing to let the traumatized person have agency and have power. And so if they want to share,
be a listener.
follow their lead and be a listener.
Yeah.
And then seek their own therapy if the child or, person is sharing too much and it's becoming traumatic to hear it.
Right.
Figuring out ways to not shut it down, but also take care of themselves.
Right. Right. Okay. So we live in really uncertain times and we're inundated daily with so many traumatic events, so many aggressive images from the news, from games, from movies, social media. Are we becoming desensitized to all of this because we're so exposed?
I would say we're not becoming desensitized to it, but that we are becoming overloaded by it.
Oh, 100% with that.
And then when we are overloaded, we tend to dissociate, right? Which is the body's natural way of saying, this is too much.
Right.
I'm going to just shut down.
Yeah.
Right. So it looks a little bit like desensitization, but I think it's
more avoidance.
or dissociation, which is the body's natural way of protecting you.
Yeah.
Which is also not healthy.
Right.
Right. We can still be traumatized if we're in a dissociative state.
Right.
So yes, I think probably some people might be desensitized to it, but I think if we dig down a little deeper, we're profoundly vulnerable as human beings.
Yeah.
So I think it would be really hard to be really desensitized to something. I think it's more overloaded. You shut down, you dissociate, you maybe create a belief system that I'm not going to let anything bother me. I'm not going to let anything, you know, I don't care about anything, but really they do.
And I think, again, I keep throwing around the word agency, but I think we really do have agency as humans. And certainly what I always recommend to my clients, whether they are trauma clients or just regular clients trying to get through life, is take your own emotional pulse. So before you turn on the news, check in with yourself and be like,
don't when
how
you're
am I at this
heightened in
moment? Right. So I always give kind of like this thing. So if your nervous system is kind of activated and you're here,
don't put on the TV.
And here means panic, anxiety, depression. Don't go turn something on. Or if you feel like, oh, wow, I'm about to be in a room with people who don't share my political beliefs or whatever it is, but you have to go, do something to calm your nervous system so you bring it down a bit. So even if you get activated, you're still not hitting
you're not
this
at that peak
threshold.
Yeah.
But really, I think there are things we can do to take care of ourselves. Don't go on social media. Don't engage with people who maybe what their narrative is and it's not aligned with your value system for the moment.
Know yourself.
And know yourself and where you're at and what shoes you're standing in for that moment, that day. And just take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of discernment that goes through that. And especially as when we're in the helping profession, whether you're first line responders or...
Okay, so that was my next question.
So, I mean, there's something called vicarious trauma, There's
so
secondary
that's what
trauma.
I know.
And I was thinking, like, am I desensitized from hearing so many difficult stories? And I don't know that I am desensitized from hearing these stories, but one thing that I do, and I recommend that anyone do, is this discernment of really recognizing and letting my nervous system know that is not mine. So if I'm watching the news or watching a traumatic documentary,
I don't have to carry that.
I think that is not mine. And when I let my nervous system know that, I can almost feel like, oh, okay, hold on. Same thing with our clients. A lot of times we hear some very traumatic, upsetting events happening to people that are very, very vulnerable. And we have to let our brain know, even though I'm feeling this emotion right now, it's not mine. And that is difficult to do, but it's even like doing a little check-in. Like I heard this doctor speak once, and he said that every time before he walks into the patient's room, he touches the door and says, whatever's in here is not mine. And then when he leaves, he touches the door again and says, I'm leaving whatever I just experienced in here. And he's just letting his nervous system know
Right.
We're not taking this home with us.
I used to have a professor who would say gunny sack it. Like, just drop it off in a backpack and leave it. And you could pick it up when you go into but that's the same thing. I love that.
Yeah.
Just touching the door. It's sort of like a physical and mental.
And I think the thing that I do, because again, we hear a lot of things and it is an honor and a privilege to sit in a room and to hear those things, is to remind myself, and it's what helps me, is while I couldn't prevent this from happening because this is how they're showing up, I feel really good and really confident in the role I get to play in
helping
this.
Them. Right.
And so and I would say first responders, if we think of traditional, firefighters and people like that, medical professionals, same thing. Whatever their skill set is that they have refined and they are so good at, is what moves the needle into whatever type of healing, emotional, physical, and that's what we lean into.
So that's was going to be one of my next questions. When we have healthcare professionals or first responders, that's sort of like a secondary traumatic experience. So how do we help them cope with that?
So there are
even though it's not theirs, they're actually in the thick of it during a traumatic event. So they're still having some experience, even though it might be secondhand.
Right.
There are many trauma institutes nowadays and research that's really focusing on how do we create trauma-informed systems for healthcare workers, for police officers, for the jails,
fire
for
departments,
teachers, and how do we provide them with this knowledge that we're talking about today and the coping skills ahead of time.
Right.
And then as well as how do we help them have first aid? So there's emotional first aid, right? We obviously have physical first aid.
Right.
Everyone who's trained in that area knows, but do they know emotional first aid?
Right.
And that could mean having that discernment of saying, that's not mine, focusing more on not feeling helpless, so saying how I'm helping them, but also deep diaphragmatic breathing so that they're really making sure their nervous system is regulated even though they're in this scary situation. I do something called tapping, which is you tap on different acupressure points on your body and you're really sending a message to your amygdala that you are safe.
Right.
And so we teach first responders all the time how to do tapping. How do they quickly go to the bathroom in situations where they really feel the adrenaline flowing through their body, their heart rate is accelerating, and they need to quickly tell the amygdala to shut off.
Right.
How can they do that? And I think these trauma-informed systems that they are really focusing more on and making sure that there's more sensitivity for our healthcare workers, et cetera, that they're teaching them more and more of those skills.
Good.
So they're going in there already feeling more resilient and stronger to be able to handle all of the trauma that they're faced with.
It also goes back to social support, the firefighters,
that's sort of a family in and of
firefighters
itself.
and their family are South Miami Psychology Group, our family. I'm even thinking, I don't know who's a Grey's Anatomy fan still, but in the beginning when Meredith and Christina were doing all these things and then they would dance it out.
Yes.
And so
that's what we do here.
Kind of having your support system with a group of people who do what you do and know what you know.
Right.
And that's one of the added blessings that we have in our practice, which is after you have a really hard session, just looking around the corner to see who's outside of session that you can pull in and not give, of course, anything confidential or identifying information, but just be like, I just had a really heavy session. Can you just sit with me?
Yeah. I was going to ask you how you cope, but before we get to ask you how you cope, why is it important to deal with trauma?
I think many of the reasons we just said, that it's not going to go away, and whatever our natural instinct is to push it away, it is going to come up, and likely in ways and at times that are not convenient.
Right.
And so
unexpected.
What a better way than to have control and say, this is the time.
Right.
And I can feel safe doing it so that I can actually put it in a box, put a nice bow on it, put it up in my closet, and take it down when I want to, not when it just decides to explode.
Right.
I think going back to the definition of trauma is something that has a long-lasting impact on your nervous system and your experience of safety in this world. If you are chronically in survival mode because that trauma is still a live wire within you, even if you're not thinking about it all the time.
Right.
It's interesting. They say the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that really protects us in difficult situations, but it's in charge of the fight or flight response. It doesn't have a timestamp. So it doesn't really know that this thing that happened to you back then isn't still happening to you. So really making sure that we're processing it. But if we're in survival mode all the time, what we know is then you're going to start to most likely develop some physical issues.
Sure.
Because the body cannot handle being in survival mode. And the other thing that we know is if you're in survival mode all the time, because part of your alarm bells are constantly going, you're hypervigilant, scared that something bad's going to happen to you again, that it pulls the blood flow and the energy from your prefrontal cortex, which is your thinking brain.
Right.
So then you're going to not be able to think clearly. You're going to have poor decision making, possibly poor impulse control, poor planning. And after time, so even though you might be okay with the thing that happened to you, if we really look deeper, you are going to see that there's going to be changes in the brain, where you're not able to really function to your highest potential, and that your body might start to shut down in other ways because your body is constantly in this state of fight or flight. So even if you've made peace with it, you always want to look and see, okay, but let me really look at it holistically and let me check. How am I doing with my mind? How's my thinking? How's my focus? How's my learning? How's my last physical checkup? How's my blood work doing?
Yeah, sure.
And then we can kind of say, okay, maybe you're good.
Maybe you're okay. Yeah.
But,
okay. Got it. Do you guys ever get overwhelmed by the work? I know you said you look around the corner and check in with each other, but do you ever get overwhelmed with the work that you do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we're human.
Yeah.
And again, what are our protective factors? Making sure that that they're online.
Right.
Having a bestie who knows.
I was just going to say, I mean, that's a built-in right there.
Who knows what you're going through. But absolutely. And really checking in and saying, am I okay? Am I showing up enough for my clients? And if not, really taking time to make sure that we can regulate ourselves as well.
You process.
And practice what we preach, right?
Yeah, sure.
So all the coping skills we are sharing and teaching, we
do
practice
yourself.
ourselves.
I like that.
And that makes us more human. And we can say, you know what? I don't love this one, but I like this one. I'm curious to hear which one you like better.
Is there something that you do to help you handle the stress of your profession? Like you said, like on Grey's, dance it out. But is there like something that you guys like go to? Like
we love to go to the gym together.
Okay, good. That's great.
Yes, we go to the gym and we love coffee and matcha. And
these are all great.
All kinds of like, we'll text each other and be like, I kind of need a treat. Do you need a treat?
Oh, yeah. We'll have cookies after.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so what's the most important takeaway?
I would say that there are some really amazing things that you can do to help yourself if you have had some adverse events and help the people in your lives, and that it doesn't have to be scary, and that you deserve to kind of let it see the light of day and not push it down, because you're worth it.
Yeah. Live a full life.
And to remember that we are wired for healing.
Yeah.
So we are all capable. We see it time and time again, really witnessing the human spirit and how resilient and strong we really are.
Yeah.
And kind of knowing that ahead of time, right? And then we talked about like creating trauma resilient children by making sure that children believe in themselves and have the strength and have their coping skills. But also like even as a parent, knowing that my child's going to go through difficult things, but they can also handle it. And there's therapies out there, there's support groups that we can come together as a community. And what Andrea talked about before, I think would be also a beautiful thing to end on, which is that post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
That a lot of times we really do not know how strong and capable and amazing our human spirit is until we have been challenged.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's true. Post-traumatic growth.
Yep.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you guys so much. This was so informative, so educational, so amazing. I love all these new modalities. I've learned so much. I mean, I'm so happy you're out there.
Yes.
You're amazing women and doctors. I'm just,
Thank
really
you
honored that you were here today.
Thank you for having us.
So before we end, I do a little thing. I hope you're game for it, called Quickie Questions.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a favorite book?
Oh my goodness. There's so many books I love. Let me think.
Maybe even a genre.
I mean, this is a favorite book I just read was The Correspondent.
Oh,
which
I'm
is
going to start that. Okay.
Incredible.
That's on my to be read.
Oh my gosh. And then Remarkably Bright Creatures.
I love that.
It's like beyond.
I love it. But did you listen to it on Audible or did you read it?
I don't remember so The Correspondent I listened to because you have to listen to it. Remarkably Bright Creatures. I want to say I read it.
Okay, because I listened to it with Mark Urey
Okay.
from Ugly Betty and also in Shrinking.
Yes.
And just the way that he spoke as the octopus. I mean, it was I was taking long trips, so that's why I did it on Audible. I thought it was brilliant because the way he delivered it. So, okay, sorry.
Yes.
I got excited about that book. I love that book.
Yes, so good.
You know, I don't really listen to fiction or read fiction. I love memoirs, but I couldn't even tell you right now
Which one?
which one.
You'll think about it
but
on the car ride home.
Definitely, probably just already since January, I've probably listened to 5 memoirs because I love them so much. So
Yeah, I love that.
if you have any recommendations, I'm always looking for new ones.
I'm going to give you a bunch after.
Okay.
But they're oldies, but they're good.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right. What did you learn or wait, what did I say? I can't even read my writing. Wait, I need my glasses on this one. Okay. What did you learn or experience that changed the way you see the world?
Today
Today?
or in
Any
general.
day.
I think having children.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh my
That'll
God.
change
And
the way
having
you see it.
teenagers.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I thought I had changed the way I see the world, but now having 2 teenagers,
Yeah.
now I'm
That'll
in the
definitely
thick of it.
change.
What am I going to say? I'm ripping off yours.
Okay.
I think just having children and having been in this field before I had children and as a child psychologist and thinking I knew all of these parenting things to do and all these things to do in theory and then being like, how do they not come with manuals? This is so complicated and
it changes constantly.
And it changes and
You have to be on your toes.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, yep.
That's so funny. Okay, because you're besties, what quality do you look for in a friend?
Someone I can rely on, someone who, when I'm not feeling my best, can take over for me.
Yeah.
Someone who's willing to drop everything if there's something big going on, either positive or heartbreaking.
Right.
And just someone who knows you.
Yeah.
We, over the years, because we have a friendship and a partnership, we literally finish each other's sentences.
Love
And
that.
it's funny, we'll be interviewing someone and we don't even have to check in with each other before we recognize whether we're going forward to the next step or not.
You know the dialogue between each other.
We know the body language. We know all of that
Right.
stuff. So just someone who knows you and you can be yourself with and not have to put on
Be
any
authentically you.
mask.
I think what's really helpful as we're aging and our mind is not as sharp as it used to be. We kind of share our brains.
Right,
It's
that's
really
okay.
helpful
That's good.
Because when I can't think of something or, I forgot something.
You have a backup brain.
Right. I'll be like, wait, did we do this yet?
I also think having a best friend who's non-judgmental, I would say is probably the number one thing. I mean, I think everyone looks for that in life. And there's something so freeing about that.
Sure. Someone who accepts you as you are, you're authentic. You can be your authentic self with. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Okay. Last question. Last time you laughed?
I mean, we just laughed a lot.
No.
We just laughed a lot today.
You did?
Yes.
Oh, I meant like belly laugh. Like, I mean, yeah, you were laughing today, but anything that stuck out,
Belly
like
laugh. I don't know.
I'm thinking about if my husband's listening, he would want me to say last time he told a really funny joke because he thinks he's a comedian.
but he's not. Okay, sorry, husband.
I would actually say nobody makes me laugh more than my father-in-law.
Oh,
I don't know. I can't even think of a particular instance.
Yeah.
But I will literally, because we have a serious job.
Yes.
We do. Summer and I are literally 24/7 SMPG. Like when people are like, tell us about your kids. We're like, we have 5 kids between us.
love it.
But SMPG is our baby and it's always a baby.
Yeah.
We're always working on it. So I'm pretty serious. I see my in-laws every Thursday night and my father-in-law makes me laugh to the point of tears.
Oh, I love that.
I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, that's
and he'll
it.
just look at me. He'll be like, I love making you laugh.
I
And I'm like,
love
no
that.
one can make me
That's
laugh
so
like you
cool.
What a
can.
wonderful
Yeah.
release, though.
It is.
That's
It is.
amazing.
But I
Oh,
can't
love
even
that.
tell you what the
It
topic
doesn't
was.
matter,
It's just
but just
ridiculous
being
stuff.
with him. That's a
a
good
power
one.
that he has.
That's a
Yes.
great
Cool.
one. Oh,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you again. This
Yes.
was fabulous.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to give book recs and cookies afterwards.
Sounds good.
To our listeners, thank you so much. So grateful you're here. Keep listening, keep learning, keep laughing, keep up with Beek on Being. Follow Beek on Being on Instagram for the latest. To share thoughts, ideas, suggestions, or nominate a guest, DM us. Listen to Beek on Being wherever you get your podcasts. All episodes are automatically transcribed. A big shout out and a huge thank you to Stephen Chen at Penthouse Studios. Woo! Beek on Being was recorded at Penthouse Studios and is a proud member of the Penthouse Podcast Network. We good? Thank you guys. This was amazing.
That was
my
fun.
God.